It's great fun to be here with all of you, to see you at the stage of life you're in and the work that you're doing in this fascinating moment in time when you are working in India for a German company, working hours that match Europe a little more than America. Here I am, an American person who lives in Silicon Valley, where undoubtedly all of you have relatives or friends of relatives. Not one Indian person ever comes to my house without knowing somebody somewhere and going down to see them in that area. In fact, I was in Starbucks in Gurgaon, and it was filled with, no surprise, Indian people with their computers open, and I thought I was in Palo Alto. Because that's just what Starbucks looks like there, exactly the same. And people speaking Hindi or Marathi or whatever language they speak to one another. Where I live, in fact, there is almost no dominant language, oddly enough. Written is still always in English. But 1/3 of the people where I live are Spanish-speaking. 1/3 are from some part of Asia, whether India, Japan, China. A small slice are from Russia. And then there's all the rest of us. And so it really is a melting pot of a new world. And all of you, I think, are participating in a very interesting shift globally. And I think the world that you are entering into and are preparing yourselves to live in is really not like the world of your parents, which is me, or your grandparents, which is also me. I just came through a different reality. One of the ways I put it is that my generation has learned to be generous-hearted about other cultures, other races, and so on. I've noticed my nephew, who is your age, he doesn't even notice. He's been raised in a world where there's so much interplay among the groups that he doesn't even define people anymore. And specifically, the paradox that I represent for you, which is that I am practicing yoga and meditation in Silicon Valley, and I'm American, of course, self-evidently. I run a temple there, and almost all the people who come are people who are following technical careers, working for all the name companies that you know. Although Steve Jobs never came into our temple, his house was about 2 miles away. And he was interested in the path that I follow. And all of that is just all the time whirling around. And so the paradox that we're working with, which is, I would put it differently, I would call it a new paradigm that we're working with, is an integration of things that used to be separated, which is there used to be the spiritual and the material, or there used to be the East and the West, or the Indian and the English, or the Indian and the American. But all of these differences are becoming moot. I mean, it's a joke in America that all of the tech help you get is probably somebody in Gurgaon answering the telephone, you know, and I don't know to what extent the myths are true that they mimic the American accents. You know, somebody will say his name is George, and you know, not likely. What is your name actually? Ganesha. Okay, let's talk then. But we're just always in touch with each other, always. Just on the way over in the car, we were texting back to the United States, to various parts of India, just without even thinking about it, answering each other. But on a much deeper and other level, and in a sense, I don't like to say too strongly, you know, your generation has a duty, like your college graduation speeches, come, you must, this sort of thing. I'd rather look at it like an interesting opportunity that you have. The history of India, as you know much better than I, had the English sweeping in and taking from your country an enormous amount of material wealth, and eventually your people standing up strong enough to put a stop to that, which was exactly as it should have been. At the same time, what has been exported from this country most recently has been this extraordinarily powerful teaching, which is the capacity how to manifest that wealth. And I don't just mean money, but I mean manifest true prosperity. I have somewhat humorously said that the Indian people were smart enough to let the British just take the gold and the jewels, but the real wealth of India, which is this more subtle understanding of where power comes from, you were smart enough to hide it in the Himalayas. And so what they took will pass away. But what you kept is what makes the country great. And even great materially. But now there's this sort of interesting kind of shifting back and forth of energies where you all are having to rediscover in a new way what that power is. And it's represented by all of the traditional, of all the different traditions, religious traditions there are here, all the outward rituals, the various things that you all know better than I. I visit the temples and mosques as a tourist. You know, you'll come into them more from birth and are trained in it. But the essence of power has always been within us. And the essence of the control of our destiny has always been within us. Where I live, we naturally, we do not try to convert anyone to the practice of meditation. It's kind of hard to convert someone to do it. They have to be inwardly inspired to want to do it. But naturally, we want to communicate that it's a possibility. So I say we don't try to proselytize, but we do advertise, naturally. So when we have to think about marketing any product, you have to try to think, you know, who is going to listen to you and what is the demographic of the people who are going to listen to you. And it's been very interesting to us that, except for the fact that there has to be a certain level of education and a certain level of prosperity. Because if people who are just struggling to survive on a most basic level, they don't have the leisure energy to think about more subtle realities. But after that, the single unifying characteristic is the ability to understand the potential of personal power that I can access by right thinking, right action. What I mean by that is not the correct, but by understanding how to access that energy. So those are a few of the things I want to discuss with you. And all of this I learned not in school, but I learned after school from the practice really of meditation and the training I've had from my spiritual teachers. I was a very school smart kid, and I actually even went so far as to enter into Stanford University, which is right across the street from where our temple is now. I, at that time, was intensely a truth seeker, already seeking truth. And I was looking for wisdom. I wanted someone to tell me how to live, not merely how to have a career and how to make money. I wanted someone to tell me how to be myself in a way that would give me confidence in my future. I suffered a great deal from being so school smart because I was aware of the fact that I was smart in school, but I wasn't wise. And that created in me an astonishing insecurity that almost no one was aware of, but I was constantly aware of it. And in truth, what happened to me at Stanford, which was so disconcerting to me, was that I began to make A's and A pluses the first couple of weeks of school, which you would think would be fabulous, but it scared me. Because here I am, and apparently I'm already at the top of this game. And so nobody was talking to me about the parts that didn't work. What is the meaning of life? And above all that, where does real understanding come from? Where does real happiness come from? And I just have this random gift that seems to be rewarded in this world, but I don't feel inside like I have a grasp, even of my own self. It's like something I was wearing on the outside. So I lasted that 1 year, and I alternately flunked courses and made first-class marks, just kind of randomly. At the end of which I just decided this wasn't for me. And I never went back. But shortly after, I encountered the American disciple, Swami Kriyananda, who had wisdom. And I recognized it as soon as I saw it. So I've had this odd life. I'm going to tell you of my brief working career in situations like yours, a piece of it, because it's very relevant to what's happening to you all, I think. I worked in the legal profession. I was not a lawyer, but I have a lawyer's mind. I believe strongly in reincarnation, so I believe I've been a lawyer many times. Now I actually enter a law library and immediately fall asleep, almost immediately. So I guess I'm not to do that anymore. But I worked in the clerical side of the law profession. And this was before I met Swami Kriyananda and this was my interlude after dropping university without graduating and before entering the ashram. There's a place in San Francisco called Montgomery Street, which is a very prestigious street. And I got a job with a very prestigious law firm. I could almost say it for a long time. It had like 6 names on it. Holloway, Clinton, and Clark. Forrester something, Holloway, Clinton, and Clark. You would answer the phone, Forrest and so, Holloway, Clinton, and Clark, just like that. And that was just before computers, or long before computers, but they had innovated from a typewriter to a machine that could save what you typed and reproduce it. So it was the beginning of what became word processing. I somehow got into the knack of that machine, and it was a specialized job, and I got a good job with this good company at great working conditions on the 31st floor at 1 Montgomery Street. Just couldn't have been more. If I wasn't going to have a university degree, I was right where I should be. Although I stood at the 31st floor and thought about San Francisco earthquakes sometime, and that made me a little nervous, but then I'd come back from the window. So they hired me on a 90-day trial period. A very, very fine HR director, really, really a good woman. I really liked her. And I worked for 90 days. On the 90th day, I was so confident I was going to ask for a raise. On the 90th day, they fired me. Yeah, and it was like a complete disconnect. First of all, nobody ever rejects me. I'm smart and I'm nice. I'm articulate. Nobody rejects me. So just that was like, what? And also this complete difference between how I perceived my position and how I was perceived. The personnel director tried to explain it to me, but it was 10 years later before I understood. 10 years later, I have grown up. You know, I am 10 years older, which made me only like 28 at that point. And I was running a publishing company. And I was running the publishing company for the ashram. And I really cared about the work I was doing. It was very important to me. And by that point, I really understood excellence. I understood excellence on many levels other than good enough to get the grade, good enough to fool the people giving the test. I understood excellence as my own sadhana, my own personal discipline was excellence. And it really hadn't been that before. And there was a couple of people working for me who were working for the money. And to them, it was a job. And even though they did their job, I could really feel that underneath it, they really didn't care what happened. They did not have a personal commitment to excellence. And above that, what we were doing was of no consequence to them. They took their check home, and as long as they got their money, they could just, the publishing company could rise or fall. At which point I knew why they had fired me. Because I really didn't care. I didn't care at all about any one of those lawyers as a person. I didn't care about their careers. I didn't care about the success of the company. I had drawn a small circle around myself. I was there to do my job because I wanted to be able to get what I could from that company and take it home. And I realized that that personnel director had just seen right through me. And it was a really good company and a really good job. Why would they keep someone like me there? Just because I was smart. And I wrote her a letter. I never got a response, but I said, thank you for firing me. I've been puzzled all these years. And now I really understand it. Now, I've been very fortunate that in my early 20s, all of my career has been identical to my life. And I recognize what a privilege that is. And that might just be too much for any of you to expect, or to expect right away, that you will genuinely from your heart be committed to the project that you're doing. But you must understand, and this is the great secret of yogic power, and this is how I think about it, that people try to influence the material plane from the material plane, which is, I present myself in the right way, I read this book about negotiating, I know how I'm supposed to interview like this. But you can control the material plane from a more subtle plane, which is that energy and thought and attitude are more powerful and actually rule the material world. This, to me, is the secret that went to the Himalayas when the British were stealing all your jewels. It's like what we have is an understanding of the true nature of the universe, which is, and now science is just giving it to us. We don't have to be yogis or even Indians anymore to know it. I'm very impressed where I live. A lot of Indian people come to our temple, and a lot of Indian families put their children in our schools, because we're the closest thing to supporting that culture. But in many Indians who come to Silicon Valley are very materialistic and not particularly traditional. But the most materialistic Indian always knows something that most Americans don't know, which is just this greater reality. And in your life now, I think the opportunity is to not just develop yourself externally and learn all the charts and so on, but the phrase that we used to describe this was how to attract success, how to attract happiness and satisfaction. And that's the clue that we're looking for. It's not that we accumulate or acquire. My teacher, Swami Kriyananda, he wrote a book and he called it Money Magnetism, which I thought was a marvelous title. And what he writes in there is it's on one hand you can try to acquire something and hold it on the material plane. On the other level, you can try to develop the energy within yourself that you literally become a magnet for opportunity, for success, for happiness, for whatever you need at the time that you need it. But this is an entirely different discipline. In our schools, we have, we've been developing schools for about 40 years. And in our schools, we truly educate the whole person. I mean, it's not enough just to be school smart like I was. They also have to be good people, they have to be honorable, they have to be truthful, cooperative, loyal, and aware of their own inner potential. I'm not going to really explain the whole school, but this is the point of it. A young girl graduated through junior high, through middle school, in our school system, and then went to the high school, the public high school. And she appeared on the honor roll, and was, all the news came back to all of her friends and family. Oh, congratulations. She says, it's so easy there. She said, I answer the tests right, and that's all anybody wants to know. They don't care if I'm in a good mood. They don't care if I've been nice to my friends. They don't care how stinky my attitude is when I'm doing my work. All they want is the result. Now, you can approach your job from the point of view that if it looks right, it's right. Or you can approach your job as an opportunity to really develop within yourself a flow of magnetic enthusiasm that will make you stellar. Because everybody feels it. Everybody can feel, whether you're sitting there hating what you're doing and criticizing everybody around you, or whether you bring into your environment, and I've been walking through your offices and I see where you are, you're all close together, and therefore your thoughts are tangible realities. Your vibrations are tangible realities. And the more dynamically you are affirming a positive flow of energy and an ever-expanding reality, the more that will become your future. We're creating our future every day with the thoughts that we're thinking right now. You know, a minute from now, you will be the result of whatever this minute is happening right now. We see that cause and effect all the time. All of you have this job because somehow or another you put one step after another, which resulted in your getting hired here. Whether you advance or stagnate now depends less on where you're sitting as what you're doing with what you're sitting. And it's also the same key to happiness. I'll give you a very small example of this. When I first came into the ashram, the job that needed doing was cooking. And I stepped into the kitchen of this retreat that we were running, and I cooked 6 days a week, 3 meals a day. And on the 7th day, I drove this big truck into the local town, and I filled it up with food, and then I drove it back to where our retreat was, which was way back in the mountains. We had 6 miles of dirt road, and the last was a steep hill like this. And I'm not a large person now, but I was even smaller then, but I was strong. And I was feisty as could be. And it snowed a lot. We were in the mountains about 2,500 feet, and it snowed a lot in those days. It doesn't snow as much now. And our truck did not have all-wheel drive. It was just regular. And so when it was snowing and I had the truck full of supplies, the last hill, often we couldn't make it up the hill. And I gradually figured out that there was no real danger because the truck would just kind of slide off the road into the ditch like this. There was no cliff. So it got to be really fun. I get to the bottom of the hill. I mean, I could barely see over the steering wheel. At the bottom of the hill of this great big pickup truck with hundreds of pounds of food in the back, and I'd just see how far I could get. The truck would go up like this. It would turn sideways. It would go sideways up the hill. It would skid and skid like this. And I just loved it. It was total fun because there was no real danger. It couldn't topple over. And we'd get as far as we could get. And then I'd have to just go up the hill, bring everyone down, and we'd have to carry everything the rest of the way. You know, potato sacks, fruit boxes, in the snow, always. Now, it would be really easy not to enjoy that. It was wet, it was cold, usually it was dark. But I just decided it had to be done. And if it had to be done, it would be so much more enjoyable to enjoy it. Just as simple as that. And I began to appreciate how often nothing hard is really happening. We have just decided that something hard is happening. When I was about 3 years old, I decided I would clean out my toy shelf. At the age of 3, I picture my toy shelf as being about as big as that wall. The likelihood is that it wasn't. Probably it was just a little shelf like this. Being a rather enthusiastic person, even at a small age, I started by pulling all the toys off and making just a huge mess in the middle of the room, at which point I lost interest in the project, wandered off in my house to do whatever I wanted to do until my mother noticed what I had done. So she marched me back and told me, "You made the mess, clean it up." So I decided that this was so tragic. I could just hardly bear it. I remember all this. I just looked at those toys and looked at the empty shelf and then looked at the toys, you know, and looked at my mother who was just, no, she was having none of it. And then I said, okay, I'll clean it up. And you know how little children go, I like this. And I remember like lifting a toy as if it weighed a ton, just kind of, and then putting it on the shelf, and then sobbing a little bit more. You know, my mother was just like, you can do anything you want, child. You are going to put all those toys away. Somewhere in the middle of doing it, a whole other part of me said, just put the toys away. What is the big deal? Like this. I don't recall whether I listened. But that lesson, oddly, has stayed with me in a very dynamic way. Because every job I have discovered, no matter how much you love it and how interesting, has a really dull part. And sometimes the dull part is a lot bigger, but how dull it is less related to what it is than whether we're boo-hooing all the way through it. Or just deciding, let's just do this. Let's just be enthusiastic. Let's make it fun. You know, I can't control necessarily what my boss gives me to do, but I can control how I relate to it. And there's another key that is really important in all of this. And it's two words that sound a lot alike. One of them is will, and the other is willingness. Okay? And will is a little tiring. I have the willpower to get through this. Almost by definition, it says, this is a terrible experience, but I'm strong enough to endure it. And we have a little satisfaction of being strong enough to endure it. But by the time we get home, we're not usually very nice or happy. The other is just, I'm willing to do this. And willingness gives so much energy. This is a story that Swami Kriyananda would often tell. Let's say you had a bunch of friends over after work to your apartment, and you had a lot of food, or to your home, you had a lot of food, a lot of refreshments, people were there for a really long time, maybe you were listening to music, maybe you were laughing, maybe the lamp got knocked over, a bunch of stuff happened. The room is a mess. It's a work day, work night. You just say, forget it, I'm not going to deal with it. Maybe you have servants to clean it up. In America, we wouldn't. But anyways, let's say you have to clean it up yourself. It's a mess. But you're too tired, you have to go to bed. Next day, you drag yourself out of bed, you see the mess in the house, but you're too tired to deal with it, you go to work. You drag yourself through work. One of those days where every time you look at the clock, 5 minutes has gone by. Have you had those days? The days in which you do your 9-hour shift in 5-minute increments like this, just never ending. Finally, the day is over. You drag yourself home. The mess is still absolutely out of the question. You collapse on the couch. You're just dead to the world. Your mobile rings. Oh, it's my friend from college. You call. He's in town for one night, just tonight. And he's gathered the old gang, and they're all down at so-and-so place. You're out the door. Midnight comes. You're just coming in. You're so happy. And you see all that stuff that you couldn't even deal with. Where did the energy come from? The energy came because you wanted to do it. It's just as simple as that. When you want to do it, you don't even think about it. When my first friend had a baby, the first close friend of mine who was a mother, and the baby, when I saw her, the baby was just beginning to walk. And she was constantly, there was no conversation because every 2 seconds she was chasing the child around the house. I have never had children. I like children, but I was not inspired by the idea of being a mother from watching her. I said to her in this language, how can you stand this? And she gave me the most wonderful answer I've never forgotten. She said, you look at us and think that there is him and there is me. She said, there's only one here. You know, it's one field of energy. I am as much my child as I am myself. And so to me, there's no imposition on me doing this. Now, I've never applied that to having children because I don't have them. but I have applied that to many, many, many other things that I have had to do that look from the outside or the inside as if they are too difficult. But if this is me, I would just do it. If this were my hand, I would just raise it. I wouldn't think that I couldn't do this. You see, much of the way we experience life is how we think about it and how we think of ourselves in relation to it. Now, the biggest obstacle to all of this is our own habits. And a lot of times, and I don't know your backgrounds or where you come from, but I've seen many wonderfully privileged and pampered young people in India who were given a lot of opportunities. Maybe some of you are of that background, maybe others of you have had to work all the way through to bring yourselves to where you are. But one of the things we really have to understand is that everything in life is an exchange of energy. Whether it's the power of tapasya, and what tapasya, an explanation, a definition I'll give, is not suffering. But tapasya is concentrated energy that creates magnetism that draws more energy to it. This is our word, attracting. And tapasya is also defined as just the patient application of the willingness to do it. And if we're patient, part of the difficulty that we experience that messes up our thoughts, that causes us to be a rebellious mix of I have to do it but I don't want to, is the simple, excuse me just a sec, the thought went out of my head. A simple lack of, oh, I know what it is. A simple thought that the next minute will be better than this one if I can just get through this one. My second profound revelation on the spiritual path, or actually my first. My first was when I was a little 3-year-old. This was later, when I was about 19. I was just beginning to glimpse the fact that what I was looking for was actually inside of me. That there was no external reality. It was a question of how I worked with my own energy. And I'm very quick by nature. I think quickly, I move fast. When I'm in a crowd, if I want to get to the front of it, I don't know, I can always find a hole. People behind me are left behind, and I've somehow found a hole, and I'm in the front row if I want to be. So that manifested as a certain impatience and a tremendous tendency not to be here, but to be where I was going in my own thinking. So I'm washing the dishes at home, washing the dishes, thinking about all the other things I'm going to do afterwards. And this voice in my head, and you'll have to excuse because the voice in my head used a curse word. It said, "What's your hurry, honey? It's just one damn thing after another." That's what it actually said to me. The voice of God speaks to me, and this is what he says, right? It's just one damn thing after another. And I was not a person even who used that language, but it communicated to me. It's like, all of a sudden I realized, what do I think is going to happen next? What do I think is going to be so different about next that isn't here? And if I'm not here, what makes me think I'll be there either? And a tremendous amount of why we don't attract what we want is we're so busy imagining it that we're not doing anything right now to actually magnetize it. Because we're not acting with grateful intention. How happy I am to have a job here. Look at me, I'm working in this classy building with all these nice people. You know, imagine many other options that I could have. Instead, I have this one. I had the good education, the intelligence. There's just like, there's a bushel basket full of gratitudes. And here's about the power of gratitude. If you give somebody something and they say, well, this isn't what I wanted, and just throw it on the ground, how inclined are you to go out and buy something else for them? There's no magnetism to inspire you to want to give. All of the interactions and rules that we see acting out with each other are an expression of more subtle energies that are happening all the time. You know, you can be a spiritual person and call that divine. You can be a scientist and just call that the way the particles interact. But whatever kind of magnetism you are putting out is going to determine what comes to you. So if in this moment, we're not in this moment, but we are thinking about when I get promoted way past this job and have the corner office over there and this gets to happen, the chances, one, of your getting it are much less. And also it's like, I'm grateful for what I have. Let me do this really well. Not because I'm disciplining myself to do it, but because I want to. I want to do this. And part of the art of being magnetic is to always find a reason why it's fun. You know, why it's fun to do this. Fun is the greatest magnetism of all. Because fun is automatic. If you think of something as fun, it's automatic, isn't it? You don't have to work hard at it. And this is what we're constantly trying to make happen with ourselves, is to, now, because the topic we talked about was not only career, but also going home, the next half of my time here, which some of you are attending, but not all, is all about people. So I'm not going to go completely there because I have to save it for the next hour. But there's another factor, which is the good news and the bad news, which is magnetism is 24 hours a day, every minute that you're thinking. There's no way to hide your thoughts from the universe. Whatever vibrations you are putting out, those are the vibrations that you are. And whenever we get in the habit of letting our energy sag or our attitudes get stinky, then that starts forming the vibration of who we are. So it's very often that people are extremely nice at work and not at all nice at home. Just sort of thinking I've used up my quota of niceness, and now all of you people I don't have to please anymore. Swami Kriyananda about himself said, he said, I'm different than most people. I think the ones who are closest to me deserve my best energy. And if we become two people, that lack of consideration comes with us back to work. Because this is physics. This is just physics. Whatever I'm vibrating is what I vibrate. Even if I put a smile on my face, you know, you'll notice that people can't fool you. Haven't you noticed that? You know, how are you today? I'm just fine. There's nothing at all wrong. I get the feeling you're a little tense. No, I'm not tense. What makes you think I'm tense? You know, leave me alone. I'm just fine. Even if it's not that blatant. I had a friend who was inclined to be very moody. And I could tell by the sound of her cough whether she was in a mood or not. She coughed differently when she was crabby than she did when she wasn't. Don't ask me how, but it was infallibly true. I would walk up to her house, and if she was coughing or clearing her throat, I would say, well, it's going to be a happy day or a tough one. Just exactly right. Now, when we start realizing that the real power and force of our success is actually the attitudes we cultivate, what that does is that suddenly puts us much more in control of our own destiny. And one of the most distressing and difficult things is to feel yourself, and that's what I was describing in my early years. I was so distressed because I couldn't figure out how to get control over my own life experience. I often described myself because I was very energetic and enthusiastic and things were happening all the time. But I felt, you know the game ice hockey where they whack the puck around? I felt like the puck. And that I never knew where the next blow was going to come from. I never knew where the crowd would be cheering, you know, or whether I'd be smashed against the wall. And what I feel like when I began to understand that I could control my own magnetism by my own attitudes, then I began to feel like I was just a little bit above it. And I could kind of see who was coming at me. And I could also just be a little bit more of an influencer. Now, some of the ways that you can influence are so simple that they'll sound a little funny to you. the quality and the quantity of your energy is really the key factor. That's why I talked about will and willingness. It's not just quantity, it's also quality, because magnetism is created by quality. Now, I'm going to have you all stand up for just a minute, right where you're standing. And we're going to do something extremely silly, but I just want you to do it with me, okay? We're going to march in place, and we're going to declare. You are going to declare, I'm awake and ready. 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 Now the next one you're going to do, you're going to have to modify. It would go like this, but you're going to hit each other in the chest. So you kind of just go like this, okay? But then you can go out like that, forward like this, and then up in the air, okay? And you're going to say, I am positive, I am energetic, enthusiastic. Okay, let's try it. I am positive, energetic, enthusiastic. Oh my God, you are just pathetic. I am so not persuaded. Especially the enthusiasm was a real dud. Okay, one more time. I am positive, energetic, enthusiastic. Once more. I am positive, energetic, enthusiastic. Now with children, we make them jump off the ground. So at least rise up on your toes on the last one. I am positive, energetic, enthusiastic. Okay, you can sit down. You were very poor at that as a group. If I were grading you, I would have given you C+, B-. Okay, that exercise is ridiculous. I agree. But every time you do it, look what happens. You start laughing, you start feeling a little silly about things, you stop taking yourself so seriously, and you start remembering, oh look, I can just decide. Isn't that so? I don't feel good, it's 4 o'clock, I'm never gonna get home. You know, I'm positive, energetic, enthusiastic. And you fool yourself. You trick yourself. And then what happens? You sit back down to the work that you have to do. It's like a different project, isn't it? You know? So every time you feel that your magnetism, you're losing your magnetism, you're losing everything. That's how Swami Kriyananda put it to me. Once you lose your magnetism, you lose everything. Because you may still be able to go through the motions, but you are no longer attracting the right kind of energy to you. I used to sew, and I had in my sewing box a little magnet somebody gave me. I learned to sew as a child, so I had this magnet, had all the pins. I spent a whole lot of time when I was bored with the sewing, playing with the magnet and the pins. So I have this real strong picture in my mind about how something magnetic will just draw all this stuff to it. And in fact, you can't even pry the stuff off because the magnet really holds on. And when I became more sophisticated about the power of thought, the power of attitude, the power of my own energy, I always thought of that magnet drawing those pins. And so whenever I feel my magnetism either sinking or becoming lousy, because you can have bad magnetism. If you think about people you know, some people just have, the only thing you can call it is great magnetism. You just want to be with them. And it's not necessarily that they're clever or can help you in your career or anything like that, but they just, you feel good around them. They're radiating something positive. If you're an employer or an employee, who are you going to want to have in your company? When I was working darn it, I wish I could remember that. Forrester Clinton, Forrester something, Holloway, Clinton, and Clark. There we are again. I had lousy magnetism. I had all the brains in the world, and I did my job really well. But every time that personnel director saw me, she saw that I just really didn't care. And in retrospect, I realized that the only people who worked in that company were people who were giving to the situation. And if we begin to think of the work that we're doing as we're giving to the situation, it may not be You might not be able to make it cosmically important, but nonetheless, a lot of families are being fed through this company. I don't just mean the products that are being sold, but all the work that's being done. It supports people all over the world. It provides a valid service to people all over the world. And it's true, you may be a tiny cog in that, but nonetheless, you're giving. You're giving a reality that is genuinely beneficial, especially if you feel it that way. And if you can't feel it for the work, feel it for the other people in the room with you. Do you want to be the one little bright cubicle that people just walk by and then feel a little better about their day? Or do you want to be the one that they go a long way around? Because every time they come near you, oh boy, do they hate their job. Right. And you can just be thinking about serving in all those different ways merely by the ideas that you have. Think how wonderful it is even to have anyone in your life who is happy to see you and you can feel thinks well of you when they see you. I have a particular friend who is so dear to me. And I really tried to think what makes her such a wonderful friend. Well, one thing, she's just always so happy when she sees me. And she's just genuinely, there she is. And she thinks I'm a really nice person. And she knows me well, so she has reason to think I might not always be. But she always holds that positive thought. And it's a great practice. I used to work in a retail store. This was my interlude. I worked in a retail store for a while. One person, one customer, who genuinely gave me supportive, friendly, I see you, I know who you are, I want you to be happy, made my whole day, my entire day. And just think how much you can give to your parents, to your spouse, to your children, when you go home. Oh, I'm so glad to see you. Just genuinely, I've been married some 30 years to my husband, and you know, sometimes wives have to train their husbands a little, just a little. And I remember telling him at one point, you have no idea how little quality attention you have to give me to keep me really, really happy. I said, it's very efficient. If just when you see me, you stop what you're doing and just make sure that I know that I'm your wife and you're so happy to see me. I said, it'll take you maybe 4 minutes a day. And if you don't, it'll be a lot more than that of unhappy times, I promise you that. And to his everlasting credit, he did the math. And he's been really attentive to it since then. But it also teaches me, you see, just the tiniest amount makes you attractive, makes you attracting. And then people don't even know why, but they feel good when they're around you because you're giving. I'm giving to my company by doing my work right, and if my project bores me, I'm thinking of thousands of employees who are all get to take home a paycheck because we're keeping this company going. I mean, that's worth doing. Think how many families are being helped by your little tiny energy. And if you look around at your friends or your acquaintances here and just think how wonderful that they are able to have this job, how nice it is that they're contributing, and think about their nice qualities, whatever they might be. Articulate it if you can. You know, that's very nice the way you're wearing your hair. I really appreciate the way you keep your cubicle. I'm always so glad to see you when you come in. It's nice that you're always on time. You can always find something. And if you can't, you can just think, wow, this man really needs love because look what a mess he is. But at the very least, you're still giving. Willingness, giving, positive, energetic, enthusiastic. That's the secret of India's greatness. And your generation has a fascinating opportunity here. Because India has to come up. My spiritual teacher said, you know, the sentimental idea that India should remain in whatever imaginary image people from the West have of the forest ashram, it's ridiculous. India is an extremely important country to the world because of what your culture knows. And you all know that. And at the same time, no country is going to remain isolated. So all the gifts of every nation now have to be added one to another. When my guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, who left for America in 1920, when he himself was 27 years old. And when he went, he felt called by God. He was born to do that, and that's what he went to do, and lived in Los Angeles, California for the majority of his life. Wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, influenced millions. Steve Jobs had one book on his own iPad, and it was Autobiography of a Yogi. I mean, fascinating how spiritual, material, you know, the innovation of one side touches the other. I mean, that's just amazing to contemplate. That man probably, of course, I live in his hometown, but that single individual had such an effect on the whole world. And he drew his power from what you were born into. And your interesting challenge, which I will watch with great fascination, either from this plane or from the heavenly realms after I leave you, is to just figure out how to integrate all of that and not buy in to the narrowness of a materialistic definition of life. And I don't just mean wealth. I mean the idea that power actually comes from the material plane. Power comes from inside. Power comes from attunement to the universe. Power comes by the conscious use, the conscious, dynamic, disciplined, happy use of the power that we were all born to have, that makes us into a magnet for everything that's good. We were born to be successful and born to be happy, but that is not effortless. We were born to learn how to direct our energy and our willpower to achieve that end and have really the most interesting time doing it. This is what I love about the whole idea of magnetism, you see. Every moment is a fascinating new challenge. No matter how utterly impossible the situation you're in, it always gets to be an opportunity to see how I can just turn myself around in the midst of this. And this terrible meeting, what can I find to concentrate on that will uplift my energy in this dull project or in this fascinating, wonderful work that I'm doing? You know, how can I really be innovative, really be creative? And that doesn't come from just pushing the paper around. Going into the center, raising the energy to a higher reality, and being more of who we were born to be. Well, do you want to try positive, energetic, and enthusiastic one more time? On your feet. No. Oh my gosh, you're so resistant. Okay. Awake and ready. I'm awake and ready. I'm awake and ready. I'm awake and ready. You're worse than before. Positive, energetic, enthusiastic. Better, one more time. Positive, energetic, enthusiastic. All right, I'll let you go. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and attention and your good humor. Friends, don't take yourselves too seriously. In the privacy of your own home tonight, stand in front of the mirror and go, I'm positive, energetic, enthusiastic, when no one else is watching you. Then bring that energy back with you, really. Take yourself lightly, and you'll find that you can soar. As simple as that. That's a cliche, but it's the truth. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you. Oh, if I have time. Do I have any questions?
If you pick a couple of them.
Okay. If I have them, who has them? It's hard to be the first. As someone said, why doesn't one of you ask the second question then? I don't think so. Good girl. Uh-huh.
So it's very nice to hear such things and practice it as well. But when the situation becomes not so positive,
Right.
and that's when you forget all that and you get into that
Right.
ditch of just negativity around you.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, if you think about coming to the positive side, it's not so easy, because the negativity is...
Because you have generated magnetism of a downward pulling nation. Okay, the only way that you can succeed in any of what I'm saying is to persevere no matter how many times it doesn't work. And the reason you will persevere is because otherwise you're miserable a lot more of the time. But you won't persevere unless you notice that it just doesn't feel good and it doesn't serve my cause. But the habit of falling into a downward state is really there. So you need to practice when it's easier, which is if your tendency is to fall deep into a pit, you're probably in the habit of falling into lots of small pits and not thinking it matters. Oh, this is such a bad job. I don't know why they give it to me like this. These people are always treating me like this. You know, and then you think it doesn't make any difference because then you just go on. But you're building a habit. When something challenges me, I respond by going down. So surprisingly, you can keep yourself falling into the deep pits by avoiding the shallow ones. But if you do go down, and you're not going to believe me, but if you do go down, stand in front of your mirror and say, I'm awake and ready, I'm awake and ready. I'm positive, energetic, enthusiastic. I mean, that's the only technique I taught you, and I admit it's a silly one. But it will help remind you. Now, more seriously, I would recommend you learn to meditate. I would recommend you really learn to be in touch with your own inner energy and learn how to actually direct your consciousness by serious methods that are worth learning. But that's not what I came to teach today, so I couldn't. But you're right. And you have to train yourself. But you all, heavens, how much school have you all been through? How many tests have you all taken? How many times have you known your future is on the line with these exams? I come to this country and nobody can do anything because it's exam time. So I understand how seriously you all take that. But training your own consciousness? And all of that education will not make you happy unless you train your consciousness. So you need to put your commitment, the same commitment, into that. That's what this is about, attracting. How do you attract it? Just exactly what you're saying. You have to work on it. It's not going to come to you just by saying, oh, I wish I could be happy, but I'm not. You know, it has to be, oh, but I have a choice here. I've worked on this for 45 years. And the beginning was harder than the present. But I can't tell you how valuable it is. It's the most worthwhile thing that's ever happened. Because then you can always bring yourself forward to do what you need to do. Otherwise, again, all your talent in the world won't serve you. The greatest obstacle to your success is you. And our education gives almost no attention to training ourselves. Zero. Just trains us to do all this stuff. So please do start training yourself. And once you decide you want to, you have multiple choices. Meditation or something like it, which puts you in touch with where that flow is coming from and how to adjust it, is the central, most powerful practice. But you can work your way into that, because some people find it very difficult to meditate. So you use other, more outward things. Fair enough? Yes?
Generally people say like something bad happens in your life, it's your destiny.
Mm-hmm.
So in a meditation, is there something called destiny, or you can always change your destiny?
In India, the word karma is used like this. Well, it's just my karma, like that. In the West, in my ashram, the word karma is, well, it's my karma. Therefore, that means that something I did in the past caused this to happen, and therefore something I'm doing in the present is going to make it better in the future. Complete shift with the same word. My private campaign is to change the way that word is spoken in this country. It's your word, but I don't like the way you use it. You use it to disempower yourselves, whereas the actual law of karma is cause and effect. That's what it is. It's physics. It's not destiny in the sense of somebody's after you. we have set in motion in this life or others a certain chain of cause and effect. If we don't like the effect, then set in motion a new set of cause and effect. And the most subtle level from which that happens is the magnetism of your own thoughts. You can change your destiny by saying, I am positive, energetic, enthusiastic. Because after you say that, you have willingness, you have attention, you have enthusiasm, you have positive magnetism. This doesn't mean anything, but it shifts. And then you start generating something that puts a cause into the universe that will start attracting what you want. So there is a certain destiny, but it's made by our own actions. It's like if you're driving down the highway in America, the autobahns are really, you can go really fast and really far. You miss your exit, you can't just suddenly be in the right exit. You have a certain momentum. So then you have to slow down, you have to change lanes, you have to deal with the traffic, you have to find the turnaround, you have to turn around, you have to get back. So when we see that karma has caused something to happen that we don't like, it's not enough to say, oh, I want it to be different. There's a certain momentum that brought us to that point. And then we have to start putting out the energy to shift it. But do we want to just let it keep going? Oh, I missed my exit. I think I'll give up my appointment and the opportunity and the people. I'll just drive on this road now. No, we want to say, I want to go there. And we exert the willpower to turn it. And all of a sudden, we like the effects of our own causes because they're more in keeping with what we really want from our lives. I think I have to let you get back to your work. Is that so? Is our time up? Lata has walked out of the room, so I don't know what to do at this moment. But I think that our hour is up, so I will release you. Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you.